Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All right, we are back with another episode, 10,000 Miles, episode number 68. Wow, can you imagine that? Tonight, I have the extreme pleasure to bring on a very long-time friend and brother, somebody who we spent a lot of time together, working together at a certain music scene at a music store, got to know each other through music. My good friend, Steve Bryant, talented musician. Amazing. You're going to hear all about his journey. Steve, how are you tonight?
Good, Vic. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited just to spend some time with you.
Me too, buddy. You know, for the audience, I was thinking a lot about tonight's show with Steve. And I realized, again, that I might be one of the luckiest guys in the universe. Because when I think about putting together this podcast and this show, and the good fortune I've had to bring on people that I've known through life, that have done so many cool things, that have so many passions, that have reached levels of proficiency. I had Mark Ribler on, who's musical director for Steve Van Sant. I had Gordon Reagan on, who do their thing, and we all know the success they've had and the talent levels they've had on. I've had on Chrissy Perham, 1992 Olympic gold and silver medalist in the Barcelona Olympics, CEOs of companies. The one thing, Steve, that all of you have in common is passion and discipline. It's a common thread. Anybody who achieves proficiency in anything they're doing has those two things, passion and discipline. Yeah, there's a lot more to it, but without those two things, you're done. So Steve and I met back in the 80s at a wonderful music store in Silverton, New Jersey called Garden State Music. And what a metropolis that place was, huh? Who knew?
The description of metropolis couldn't be.
Yeah, who knew, right?
I mean, the characters that came in and out of there. I think it was like 19. I'm pretty sure it was 87.
Yeah, sounds right.
And the Skid Row boys were working there.
Yep.
I had just left the United States Navy Band, and I was looking for a job, and I was working some other gigs, and I think Scotty and Dave from Skid Row were teaching there.
Yep.
They needed someone to take over all their students because they were about to go on the road.
Amazing.
And you know this to be true because you would come in and out as well.
Yeah.
It was, and I say this lovingly, it was a circus.
It was an absolute circus.
It's a circus.
It was an absolute circus. But I have such fond memories of that time. Bill Saponara, by the way, was just an amazing guy. And I think I appreciated him then, but I appreciated him many more years after I stopped working at that music store because he was just a genuinely good character. He'd take the last $100 he had cash in his pocket and go, "Hey baby, come on, let's go out and grab a bite to eat. I'm paying," and he was that guy. He was great. And Steve, I don't know if you know this, but his daughter Nicole is one of my wife's best friends.
Oh,
I still see Nicole. Yeah, we still see Nicole.
I think there was some connection there meeting your wife, correct?
Yeah, that's how I met my wife. She came into the music store with Nicole. So hey, enough about our past here at the in our meeting. I want to hear more about you. So Steve, introduce yourself as you would introduce yourself to the world. Introduce them to the audience here.
My name's Steve Bryant. I'm a musician. I'm an educator. I'm a father. I've been a Navy band member initially. I grew up in Point Pleasant Borough, played wind instruments as a kid and got the guitar bug. My cousin taught me how to play a few chords, and that's all she wrote. At that point, that was it. I can remember the summer of my 8th grade year just being in the room playing guitar all the time, so much so that my father would say, "When are you going to put that thing down?"
Wow.
When are you going to put that thing down? And through high school, same. And then when I auditioned and was accepted as a member of the Navy Band as a guitar instrumentalist, my father was very proud.
I bet.
And he's probably happy I'd never put it down. My journey as a Navy Band member, ended in the 80s, and that's when I met you, Vic. And it's a very odd thing. From there, I joined a rock band. I tour. Max Weinberg manages us. We connect with Bruce's management.
That was the Outcry, right?
It was the Outcry.
Yeah.
That was all through the 90s, 91 all the way through. And then I wind up teaching. And I was always teaching, as you know, I was a guitar instructor at the store.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hundreds of students. And I still, some of the students find me on social media and they connect. And it's really humbling to know that you touch that many people. Well, now I'm year 25 in public education.
Wow.
I know. Wow. Right. And that has been one of those things that I don't think you can run from it. I think once you have the desire to share what you know with people and you're passionate about what you do and you want to share those things with people. There are plenty of people that are passionate about what they do, but there's a certain type of individual that just wants to talk about it and just wants you to have what they have. There's a certain empathy and a certain amount of selflessness that you just want to say, you can have this. And that's over the last 25 years, I've been able to do that, is to share what I do and my love for what I do with kids from middle school through high school and beyond.
So great.
And beyond. I still talk to some musicians, talk to tons of families who became my family.
Steve, you're teaching more than music. I know you know that.
Yeah.
Right. I know you know that. It's an incredible passion to have been bitten by, not only music, but the willingness and the generosity of giving that back to others around you and sort of passing on the traditions and the talents and the knowledge and the path there.
And what you just said a moment ago, you used this word, and I love it. It's passion with discipline.
Yeah.
Also trying to, instill in the students that it is about discipline. And anything that's worth doing is worth doing. You have to take the time to do it. You have to invest the time to do it. And I talk a lot about the stories of my failures at a younger age.
Yeah.
I learned so much more from my failures. I tell this one story every year to every new class. It's funny. If you'd like to hear it, I'll tell it to you.
Yeah, now's a good time for it.
So I was 19 and I was stationed in Guam. And the band director said, take your guitar and go to the Admiral's house, which was Commander of Naval Forces Marianas, which is on a big hill. It's just beautiful. And what he would do is he would have dinner parties, and we'd invite like congressmen would be there, et cetera, and go play dinner music. So I go over.
Wow.
They put me in a corner, kind of, someplace where I'm there, and I take out my ES 175 Gibson, and
Nice.
I start playing through as many chord solos as I can, and then it dawns on me that about 15 minutes into it, I've exhausted my entire repertoire. So what I did was I would play a chord and a scale, and a chord and a scale, and a chord and a scale, and thank goodness that there were some adult drinking going on. One of the officers' moms walked up and said, I just love your sounds. They're just
That's great.
But what I learned from that the next day is I could have stopped, and I could have been upset, and I could have been, the victim of the situation. But when you get up the next morning, you say, I'll never let that happen to me again. And you get to work and you get prepared. We're talking about spirituality. One of the things biblically it says you got to be ready in season and out of season.
Mm-hmm.
So even when you think you're out of season, you still have to prepare.
So in this case, you needed a repertoire, right?
In this case, I needed a repertoire.
But you pulled on the improv chops, right?
I did.
Which is beautiful. And I wish I were there, because I probably would have liked that even more. Because if I went back the next night, I wouldn't have heard the same thing.
No, you wouldn't have heard the same thing.
I wouldn't have heard the same thing. It would have been cool. It would have been very cool. What was that like at 19, Steve?
At 19, when you're 19, you can tackle anything, right? You're full of piss and vinegar, right? You're gonna tackle the world. It was daunting. There were a number of musicians that were surrounding me that were, on their verge to retirement from the service, who, were cats that played at North Texas, or cats that played at Berkeley, or cats at Cape Clear, and they were escaping certain things and, joining military music, because playing in a big band, you hustle for that job. But when you're in the service, that job is always there. So these
Nice.
guys could play. So it was fertile in that respect, where you were getting to listen and hear and learn. Um, and it was also, I guess, I don't. It was humbling because you realize that, wow, my little world that I was in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, just blew up.
You want to hear something ironic?
Yeah.
My youngest daughter, Mia, just graduated from UNT.
Oh, really?
Doesn't play an instrument.
Oh, she's not in the 1 o'clock ensemble. No.
She's not in the 1 o'clock ensemble. Doesn't play an instrument. She
Okay.
started out going to University of Oklahoma, got homesick.
Okay.
And so lasted about 3 semesters there and just was like, I just don't like it here. I'm not finding my spot. I don't like it here. I have a plan. I want to come home. I want to live at home and I want to go to UNT. I'm going to lose a few credits, but she had a whole plan on how she was still going to graduate on time.
Right.
And I can do most of it online because she was a victim of the COVID lockdown in high school. So the last year and a half of her high school was
Yeah.
all COVID stuff. But she did it. And so I was just at UNT a month and a half ago and she walked and got it. And I said to my wife, this is so ironic. Like I have friends whose kids who are musicians come here to go to this school with a music program.
Right.
And Mia like whistles in the shower,
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's that little story, that little tidbit is like, what more can you ask for? You have a child that you raise, that you have given the tools to come up with a plan and have the confidence to see it through, despite the thought that she might disappoint someone by leaving something that she was doing prior, and that's a hard thing to do.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah.
So I'm going to peel you back a little bit. You say so many things that bring up thoughts that remind me of my journey in childhood.
Yeah.
When I got into guitar, my dad never told me to put it down.
Yeah.
No matter how loud I was playing in the house, no matter what I was doing, he loved it because my father had a fear greater than having to deal with loud music. It was I wouldn't be home and he wouldn't know I would up to, and maybe I'd get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'd get hung up with the wrong crowd, or you'd experiment with booze or drugs or something like. But when I was playing guitar, I mean, no matter how bad it was, that was literally music to his ears because he knew exactly where I was, what I was doing. He thought it was creative and constructive. Rehearsal 4 or 5 nights a week was at my house in my basement in Jackson.
That's awesome.
Garage band. Yeah. And he would occasionally come down and check it out. But sounds like your dad, kidding around, when you're going to put it down, but you got introduced to this. What was it like? You hit your first chords. Like, how did you know? Do you remember the feeling?
I really do. I remember the first chord, not necessarily the first chord, but probably the first couple chords. I remember playing a D chord and being able to play D, D sus4, D sus9, and D, and playing that over and over again, and then discovering that, wow, I can move this form up the neck, and it sounds really great.
Yeah.
And, it's like you would, even now, it's the same feeling even now. It's like time will pass. You'll be practicing, and 2 hours will go by, and you're like, oh, wow, I got to get out of here. When you were a kid, you'd guitar for hours, and time would pass. There's a certain connection with music, and you talk about this in a lot of your shows, that and you talk about it. We were speaking earlier about how some of your buddies, even in business, you find out that they're all connected to music somehow, or getting connected to music.
Yeah.
There's something to that. It was electric, and I don't mean that like, oh, it's electric. It was just one of those things. It was gravity.
Yeah.
Just gravitate toward it. And whether it was the French horn in high school, or the trumpet for jazz band, or guitar, or being in my first garage band and, singing my first Led Zeppelin song, which was, who can do that? I don't know. But when you're a boy, you can grab those notes.
Exactly.
At a certain age, it's over. But it was similar to that. I would imagine your experience was similar.
It was. I had a cousin who played guitar, and she gave me one of her guitars because she kind of lost interest.
Wow.
And just the fact that I was getting a guitar, because we didn't have a lot, like we weren't poor, but we didn't have a lot. The rent was paid. We didn't have abundance. And like all of a sudden I got this guitar.
Yeah.
That was something that was so out of reach. I joke with Tony, our mutual friend, about golf. We used to drive by golf courses when I was a kid, and I go, "Dad, what's that?" And you go, "It's a golf course. Don't worry about that. Only rich people play golf." And so, and
Yeah.
I would be like, "Really? Who?" He goes, "Doctors, lawyers. That's who plays golf."
Yeah.
Typical Brooklyn guy. Steve, one day I've got some friends in town here. One guy's an orthopedic surgeon. The other guy cut his teeth in ER, and he has another practice. And my friend Bing calls me, goes, "Hey, dude, I'm playing golf with James tomorrow. You want to jump on?" "Oh yeah, I could do that. I could cut out in the afternoon." So I get to the first tee box. I'm with, two doctors, and I'm getting ready to tee off. And all of a sudden, like this beam of light comes down, and I could feel it's my father. And I said to the guys, "Can we get a picture?" And they go, "What are you, out of your mind?" I go, No, I got to send this picture up to heaven. I go, "My father will believe I finally made it." I go, and I told him the story about golf's only for rich people. The only people who play golf
That's great.
are doctors and lawyers. And now I'm playing golf with two doctors. And so it was hilarious. We laughed our head off. And my friend Bing got his first hole in one that day, which was
Seriously. Okay.
incredible.
That was totally looking down on that.
Oh yeah, big time.
Interesting. My cousin also was the first person to give me the guitar.
Oh really?
Yeah, she
Okay.
was. She was, kind of a flower child, and
Okay.
had an acoustic guitar. And I remember, it was like, James Taylor and not Dan Fogelberg yet, but it was like James Taylor, Neil Young, and that whole era of music, really fertile songwriting and great guitar stuff, and trying to figure that out and going from there and meeting some of the kids that were, in high school that wanted to be in bands as well. And, playing at the school dances at the time, they would have bands play instead of DJs. Right. And it was what that music kind of gave you, a pathway into hanging out with the cool kids.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They looked at you a little bit differently because they could see that you had talent.
Totally.
But also, you were kids with talent, but they could also see that you were committed. And I think that even though you're a kid, you might not be able to have the vocabulary and articulate those things. But when you see someone who's committed, there's a certain respect that you just have for that person. And
You do get it.
in high school, and I can see that with those kids. The one, you see the sports kids that are committed, and you also see the kids in the engineering department that are committed, and you can see that they get it. They can't articulate it because they don't know the vocabulary, but they get it. Yeah.
Steve, when we met, the thing that I remember vividly is that you were the jazz guy.
Yeah.
All right. And that was foreign to me. I mean, there were guys. What was the guy who ran the music store? Scott McEwen was his name, maybe?
Scott Quinn.
Scott Quinn. Yeah, Scott Quinn. Like, he had Al Di Meola into the music. Like, he was like my exposure to non-rock and roll musicians, I would call it.
Yeah.
Pat McLaughlin, Di Meola, Pat Metheny, John McLaughlin. Those guys, I'd never heard of anything from those guys before. Yeah. And it was Scott Quinn who would listen to those things in Garden State Music. And, I was like, man, that just seemed like a whole other universe, but it was so far away. And I don't think you know this about you and me. Like when you came into the Garden State Music and could play that stuff, my world got closer to jazz.
I didn't know that.
And jazz guitar. It became real. It's like, oh, people can learn and do play this. And I might have spent like 9 minutes trying to figure out if I had a path down that.
Yeah.
And I didn't. It was just, it wasn't my thing. But I always loved listening to it and respected it. Just amazing stuff. But you actually brought me that only that 1 degree of separation from me going, oh, well, if I did that, it can be done. You don't have to be like this guru on a mountaintop.
Right.
And you were amazing. You were amazing back then. What was how did you get into that? I know you studied with Vinny Carrero, right?
Yeah. Vinny Carrero in Point Pleasant. He was my first jazz guitar teacher. I was playing
Okay.
in a jazz band in high school.
Correo. Okay. Yeah.
He's still around. Just a phenomenal player.
I
He's
watched a video of him today with this guy. Heck is his name? Brett something.
okay.
What's his name? One of his other students. He does
Oh
little
yeah,
things
oh
with
yeah. Brian Betts.
Brian Betts.
He
Yeah,
teaches at
Brian
Rowan
Betts.
University.
Okay.
But Vinny grew up with like Pat Martino and George Benson.
Oh wow.
Those guys are all buds.
Oh
You know,
wow.
and we've talked about this earlier before the podcast started. Vinny was like a priest. Vinny was like when you'd go to study with Vinny, it was way more about it was the whole package. It wasn't just about music. It was also about mentorship. You know, he he did music for a living, but he wasn't really able to support himself playing his family playing it. So he worked at a tool and die shop,
Hmm.
figure with his hands, right? But a very special person. I went to school with his daughter. That's how I met him. But very special. He kind of hipped me to really playing jazz for the very first time and prepared me for the audition in the Navy.
Wow.
And that's what happened. I remember we didn't come from means at all. So I would have to work to pay for my own lessons, which
Yeah.
today wouldn't be like, what?
Yeah.
I would take my
It's
bicycle.
another podcast, Steve.
It's another, I would take
Yeah.
my guitar would be in a basket on a bicycle that I would go to my guitar lesson. No one was driving you there. And you would make that money to pay for your guitar lessons. But there's a certain thing about that, again, another podcast, the desire, right? The desire to want it so badly that you would do what it took to get it,
Hmm.
which is probably one of those things that growing up with little means, and perhaps like you said, you had enough, but you didn't have abundance. To our credit, I think this is why we're able to achieve what we're able to achieve because
Yeah.
we have that drive and desire to get to the next step. Right?
Hunger.
Hunger. So the jazz
Yeah.
guitar was that for me. Listening to Vinny play and then taking the next step, and into the Navy band, and I remember it vividly. What just completely twisted my head around was the first time I heard Pat Metheny's group record. I was at the Armed Forces School of Music. I know it's an oxymoron. And a friend of mine who was an amazing player, Joe Bassar from Long Island. I think he's a guitar professor out there now. He was in the Army band. And he was just incredible. He hit me to this guy, and I was like, what is that? I'd never heard anything like that. And then he was playing locally in Virginia Beach, and we went to see the band. And it was a quartet, and they were playing jazz, and and a lot of original music, but also they were playing some standards, but they were playing it. It was like a rock show, but not like a progressive rock show. They were playing
Yeah.
bebop, but with a completely different sound.
Wow.
That's what I said. I was like, what is this? This resonates with me. And, from then on, it has been, going further with that journey and, appreciating the shred guys like DiMeola at the time or John McLaughlin at the time. But always for me, it was more about these guys that could create their own voice and play sustainable melodies always more than, the guys that were playing stuff that was a little more avant-garde or something that you couldn't wrap your head around. Right.
Yeah. Did you find jazz and then find Vinny, or did you find Vinny and then find jazz?
The only jazz I found prior to that was playing in the big band in high school.
Okay.
So we were playing, just big band charts. And funny, we were playing a tune by John Coltrane, right? And I remember in high school, and I'm not ashamed to say this, I thought he was Coltrane.
That's great.
And that's where I was in high school. I wasn't
because
we're not surrounded by that, Vic.
No.
We're from like Jackson and Point Pleasant,
Yeah.
these blue collar towns that
Springsteen, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Boston,
Kiss.
Kiss. Yeah.
And
then the wonderful era of 70s music, my absolute favorite era of pop music. Just incredible. But
Boston came out, it was like, what is that? Right?
Yeah, totally.
I know it really really something. So no, it was that first, and then the Navy, and just getting turned on to a whole new world that just kind of blew everything up for me. And Joe and I were at the Armed Forces School of Music together. I remember we talk about discipline. You know, we would go. There would be classes all day, and then we'd go into the practice rooms for hours, and then even the weekends, all we did was practice. And the big night out is we'd go like down to Pizza Hut and get like beer and pizza, and we talk
Nice.
about music. It was a real fertile time of growth, and I'm grateful that I had that, even though it was the Navy. And you kind of gravitated to where there was a cadre of people that all of us did the same thing. Everybody was practicing and working hard.
So great. Where did you perform with the Navy?
Oh, geez. Well, my first duty station was Guam. So I
Okay.
performed all over Micronesia. We'd get on a plane with the Admiral and we played, we'd play for the Independence Day of like, we'd go down to Rarotonga, we'd go to Samoa, all over. And then I came back to the States and I was stationed in Newport, Rhode Island. And we would play a lot of college shows, high school shows, and a lot of summer concerts and festivals. But that's when I started studying privately with Randy Roos from Boston. Randy Roos was in that stable of Mick Goodrick, Matheny, Randy.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the guys that were in Berkeley studied with Randy, and I would drive up to Cambridge from Newport once a week. And Randy was a Jehovah's Witness, and he was this tiny little guy with this really soft-spoken voice. And I remember when I first got to first couple of lessons. Are you familiar with the ARP? That analog ARP that looked like
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
he had a he had a fretless guitar at the time, and he was plugging it into this ARP. He was like this crazy scientist,
Okay.
and but even his instruction, he was on another level.
Really?
Yeah, he was like, one day I went there and Bill Frisell was there having lunch. I didn't know who Bill Frisell was. Steve Swallow. All of these folks that were learning their, Steve Swallow's tunes. Falling Grace was a big tune for everybody at that era, like because it was such a unique form. Um, and that was really eye opening, really delving into a lot more harmonic possibilities, trying to understand Miles, trying to understand, and there's always that side of it that it's so. This is the thing about jazz, and people laugh all the time if I'm playing. If I'm talking too much, tell me.
No, no, no. This is perfect.
So if I'm playing, people will say, "Hey, do you want to drink?" And I'm like, "I can't drink until afterwards." Because it requires focus. And I say, well, in my earlier years when I was playing rock and roll, I'd have several,
Yeah.
play three chords all night, but
Yeah.
it probably would be better because there's a
Yeah.
certain swagger to it, right? And
Yeah.
I know I'm being silly, and that's not necessarily true. It's its own art form as well. But with the jazz thing, there's a certain sober aspect to it where, you know, when you're trying to understand something like this that has such a technical aspect to it, not necessarily facility wise, but even cognitively, what's going on with this music,
Totally.
to get to the point where you can just be free about playing it and things just start to flow. Which they asked Pablo Casals, the great cellist,
Hmm.
before Yo-Yo Ma. They said, "Hey, why do you practice so much?" And his answer was, "Because I finally think I'm getting somewhere."
I love that.
I do too. So
Yeah,
for
I
me,
love that.
getting up, like I get up during the school year about 5 because I can't sleep, not because I set an alarm. And I'll come down and practice for an hour and a half before I hit the shower and get to work. Or even in the summer, I get up early in the morning and I'll practice for an hour or two. Um, and it's an addiction. Practicing is an addiction. Some people, golf is an addiction. I play golf
Yeah.
badly, and it could easily become an addiction. But those,
I warn you, if it is, then your guitar chops are going to go down. So you can't have too many addictions.
I agree completely.
Yeah. You can't have too many.
I got back into playing guitar. Like I was playing, cover gigs for years. And, after I left the Outcry, which was a touring rock band, we did pretty well with the group, got out, started teaching and then playing every weekend, 5 nights a week, 4 nights a week in the cover scene. Then COVID hit. And I studied classical guitar with Francis Perry, which is
Yeah, sure.
Tony's guy. Then COVID hit, and I'd been just really embedded in teaching and building programs and building award-winning bands going off to here and there. And I just got back. I had the time, and I got back into the guitar, and that's when all of this Red 1, 2, 3 stuff happened. That's when I just really, um, you know, took took everything to the next step, realizing that it's really just about time.
Yeah.
Kids
Hey,
ask,
before we get into Red 1, 2, 3, I want to cover the Outcry a little bit.
Mhm.
You might remember this guy. I got a friend, one of my best friends, as a matter of fact, a guy named Don Bow. I don't know if you remember Don from back in the day.
I knew Doc.
I said, yeah, I'm doing a podcast with Steve Bryant tonight. He's like, Steve Bryant. Yeah. I think I know him. How do I know him? I said, the Outcry. Oh my God, I loved that band. He said,
Oh,
I love the Outcry. Yeah, he was the blonde dude, right? And I go,
yeah,
I guess back then, maybe I said, dirty blonde hair. Yeah, the guitar player. If I'm looking at the stage, he was always on the right side.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I said, I think maybe yes, because he used to see you. What was that place in Long Branch you guys would play all the time?
Cheers.
It wasn't Cheers.
Cheers.
It was on the water.
Cafe Bar.
Yeah, Cafe Bar.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah. We all saw you at Cafe Bar a number of times. Tiny place, but a cool little room to
Oh, it
play.
was great. I mean, that
Yeah,
crowd, that whole era of
that scene was cool.
that whole era of the Outcry, and then it moved over to the Pony. Remember that?
Yeah,
You recall that show, The Real People?
yeah.
Well, Eric Nies and all those guys who were big MTV stars, they were all part of that Cafe Bar thing.
Man, that's so cool. So let's get into that. Tell me about how you got into that band.
Okay.
What sort of it was about, the kind of music for people that don't know it, right?
So our mutual friend, who you know, Ed Abrams,
Mm-hmm.
I was playing in Atlantic City in a show band. And he had come down. He said, "Hey, I've got this band that needs a guitar player, and they're really great, and the singer is like this, and this is that, and you should audition for this band." And I think at the time, like Eric Johnson was like a big thing. We were trying to all learn Cliffs of Dover, right?
Yeah.
Badly, right? And I auditioned for this band. They rehearsed in the singer, who's my brother-in-law, the singer's garage in the back, like a big shed. And I just remember it being like a big barn door. And I walked in. Pete Hartung was their manager, who now manages a pretty successful a couple country acts in Nashville.
Okay.
And I came in and did the audition and got the gig. And these guys were all friends from high school. John Liedersdorf was the drummer, and Ron Wiley and Jay Stanley was the singer. That music was really, I guess, most of it was written from my brother-in-law, Jay. Really, really good songwriter who was very heavily into U2,
Mm-hmm.
really into Crowded House, really into eventually Delamitri, and that's kind of like what our band was about. We were very, started off always with acoustic guitar and vocals. I did some writing with the band, and then we would get together and we would do it old school, where we would get together and he would bring the song in, and we would for hours play through the song and different possibilities and different ways to come up with different treatments, like old school. Now,
Yeah.
everything's done like I can send something out to this guy, to that guy, to this guy, and see what happens.
Yeah.
So while all that was happening, I think the power of that band really was that in all those hours spent together working through things, we created this unit that was unstoppable, that people tried to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people gravitated toward because people will say there's nothing more powerful than a band, right?
Yeah.
4 or 5 guys together that are doing something that's meaningful. It had a real spiritual edge to the music for quite some time. And I guess we kind of ended our band just as ended our run with the group the same year Nirvana came.
Yeah, it's kind of when my thing kind of took its course too.
Well, there's a story about that too.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew it was. We had some really great things happening for us for quite some time. Bruce was involved in helping us out at the time. Max Weinberg managed us when the E String Band first broke up. And then, we had moved into Clive Davis. Fred Davis's son was our manager for a while.
Oh, no kidding.
From SBK, yeah.
Yeah.
Bringing people down every week to the Pony and the Fast Lane. to come see us, and then we did this huge showcase at CBGB's, and everybody had come. John Kalodner had come out. Everybody had come to see the band, and Brian Nelson was our manager, and he had thought that doing the showcase without anybody leaving without any music at the time, cassettes, was a good idea. It wasn't a good idea.
Okay.
So that didn't work out. But then we did get a go see at SIR. So Columbia had come and to SIR to see us. And at the time, the fellow who saw us, you would know his name. I can't remember it. It wasn't Donnie Einer. It was his subordinate. Was doing some real alternative stuff, and we were straight ahead pop.
Mm-hmm.
We were pop, but like power, but pop, not like power pop, like a heavy rock band. It had an acoustic edge to it.
Yeah. Had you been in the studio before all this? Like, did you guys record?
Yeah, we did. We recorded with Peter Denenberg.
Okay.
Spin Doctors was.
I remember this now. Yeah.
He was their producer because we had toured with the Spin Doctors. We did a bunch of shows with them, opening for them. We actually, and where else we did some stuff at Joe Saint's place in Point Pleasant, and we put out a number of, Drew Levine. Also, you probably know Drew. We put out a bunch of things, just some smaller stuff and some full length stuff that we had recorded and that we were selling on our own. Everything was DIY back then.
Yeah.
No social media. There wasn't any influencers. Like literally, like we would go out and fly our cars, at night.
Yep.
Show coming up, and I know you're no stranger to that because I know you probably did your fair share of all that too.
I didn't, because I was behind the scenes. I was a studio guy. I wasn't a guy on stage doing that, but I certainly worked with enough bands that were doing that, right? And there was no real. I mean, today, my son's very good friend is an amazingly talented Berkeley grad musicians in 2 bands down in Austin. When we're done, I'll give you the links to his stuff. Dude, this kid in high school was recording stuff on his phone.
Yeah.
That would just blow your mind. And I'm like, Blaze, where'd you record this? No, Mr. Pepe, they're all on my phone. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, like multi-track stuff, and now obviously as he's gotten older and had the Berkeley experience and graduated, and he's in this band, Steve, in Austin, this group of musicians, they're all Berkeley guys, and they are unbelievable.
Right.
He does the writing, the arranging, the musicianship is like on a whole other level. And
it's evolved. Evolved. Everything.
It's amazing. Yeah.
This is where we're at now. Like some of the bands I see coming out and some of the bands that I know, people hit me to, it's like there's an evolution from the guy who was playing in his garage to these guys they're just so informed.
Yeah. Big
That's
time.
what it really is. They're informed.
There are distribution platforms out there between, you're able to put your song up on Apple Music and Spotify and SoundCloud. So you got places for people to come get it. YouTube is just an incredible, incredible platform. It's grown into be the biggest network in the world when you really think about it, right?
It absolutely is. It's like the biggest industry. I mean, if you go to music industry, I was talking to the guy who runs the music industry program at Monmouth University, and he was saying, the biggest employer, it's YouTube.
Yep. Big time. But it's all self-hustle.
Everything is a hustle.
Right. There are very few YouTube promoters. Like if you want a marketing and PR company, you got to hire it. Yep. You got to do it. You got to figure out the algos. You got to go through all this stuff. You hope something goes viral. Yep. You try to plug it in. You can pay to play, so to speak, do some paid advertising and things, and hopefully something pops. And, hopefully it's something better than, you pulling a wiry nose hair out of your nose and people going, wow, that was funny, but people are being discovered. I mean, there are so many more ways for you to catch on. On the other hand, there's an incredible abundance of mediocrity out there.
I'm going to agree with that 100%. And this is even, we were, one of the questions that, I try to do some higher level thinking questions in class. And one of the questions when we were listening to the top 10, I'll do some things like that during the week where I'm teaching a guitar class or a history class of rock and roll. Mm-hmm. We'll run through this top 10 on Spotify or whatnot. And I'll say, do you think any of these songs are going to be seeing the light of the day in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? And they all say no.
Yeah.
And you put on a Zeppelin tune or an
Ugh,
AC/DC tune or
amazing.
the Eagles tune, and they all know those songs. And I think to myself, well, what's the difference? And there is a lot of good discussion from young people about that. They're very insightful, um, and they think of things that we haven't thought about.
Do you guys discuss AI music in class and like,
We do.
yeah,
We do. In fact, we listened to the Beatles AI version, the John Lennon thing, and we've also
yeah,
listened to some AI music in class too. And we're going to do
hmm
much more of that this year. We're going to include a lot more of that to talk about that, talk about, the validity of it, talk about
hmm
about how creative it actually is, talk about, does that resonate with you and why and where and how, or is it just popcorn? Is it another McDonald's that you're just eating the fast food and it's just going right through you? You
I'm
know,
going to say the Suno. Are you familiar with Suno? Suno.
uh, no.
Suno's an AI platform where you put in less than 200 character prompts and it spits out an entire song.
Oh yes, I do know that platform.
Yeah. And so I've got a subscription there. And Suno is no different really than you as a writer. Like, there's only one Stairway to Heaven on that record,
Yes.
right? Right. So you write an album of 10 or 12 or 15 songs, depending on what area you come from, and you got a couple of hits.
Yeah.
I have probably created, I don't know, 100 songs on Suno.
Sure.
And I use them for little clips for business.
Okay.
If I'm doing a little marketing on something or I want to send, like I'm building rapport or something, I build something funny and send somebody something about their company or some great project we deliver. It's tongue in cheek. However, I'm going to tell you a story. You know Jack Ponte, right? Yeah,
Yes.
you know Jack. So, he recently passed, right?
Yes.
Last winter.
Hmm.
So he and I had been sort of estranged is a tough word. We had a 10-year, real massively close relationship and then lost touch for many other reasons. That's another podcast, but sort of reconnected and then disconnected again. And I happened to be talking to Stevie Brown from Trickster. I had him on the podcast. And when the podcast ended, it was last summer. He said, man, when was the last time you talked to Jack? I said, oh, not a bit. He goes, man, you might want to give him a call. He was kind of quiet about it. You should give him a call. You should give him a call. Okay. Well, other things going on. The summer's winding down. And 2 weeks later, he pings me in September and says, hey, just wondering, did you get to connect with Jack? I said, no, I haven't yet, but it's on my mind. I'm going to do it. And so in early October, I reach out to Jack and I call him and he picks up the phone and it sounds nothing like him. He was very ill.
Mm.
And the first thing he said is, I got 6 months.
Oh,
Okay. And so, we say a lot of nice things to one another, as you would expect. Just love, no ill will. It was really a very pleasant phone call. And it might have been closer to November, Steve. I forget the exact time frame, but I remember I said to him, hey, man, I'm coming back in December to the East Coast. I'm going to swing by your house. I'm going to visit. I think he's got 6 months, right? Hang up the phone. And I'm thinking, and I said to myself, and I wonder what he's thinking about now. Like, what does he want? Like, if you've got 6 months left, what are you thinking about? And I just said, man, he just wants one last Christmas.
mm.
And I went to Suno rather than come back here and grab a guitar. I went to Suno and I said, give me a contemporary country song about a guy who's lived a good, fulfilled, long life. He's had his ups, he's had his downs, he's had his love, he's got his regrets. And through all of this, loves his family. And the only thing he wants is one last Christmas. And that's going to be the song. Well, it's the 1 in 100 that you go, people will remember this one. I play for people and they cry.
Sure.
And I'm going to send it to you when we're done here tonight because it's a country hit.
No.
It's definitely a country hit. And even the instrumentation is really great. And the lyrics aren't hokey because usually some of the lyrics come out and it's like a little hokey. But this one was legit. And, but shortly thereafter, I talked to Matt and Gunnar Nelson, the Nelson brothers. because they called me when they heard Jack had passed away about a couple of weeks after that. And they had called me, just say, hey, dude, it's been too long and we love you.
Oh,
Hey, man, I love you too. This is ridiculous. It's been too long. Like, we're reaching out to everybody that we had connections with. And, we got to not let this be all this time. And I told them about the AI thing, and I sent it to them, and they're like, wow, that's pretty remarkable, actually. And they sent me a new song that they just wrote and recorded, but you just knew the difference, man.
yeah.
I mean, here was this craft of heart and soul,
Yeah.
and this beautiful creation that came from humans.
Yeah.
The little AI song was like a pinprick
Yeah.
on a rhinoceros's keister. It was like it was all of a sudden nothing. And this song that these guys had put together was just the everything was perfect about it. The writing, the lyrics, the recording, the instrumentation, the attention they paid to the vocal, and what they did was phenomenal. So AI is not taking over just yet, but it is an interesting mix. And I'm telling you, for jingles and stuff like that, jingle guys are in trouble, because you can create a lot of stuff with AI, and I'm really getting into and watching what's happening on the video front as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty incredible what AI is doing. It's expensive.
They did. It wasn't Suno. It was another one. It's like song something.
Yeah.
Basically, she just typed her lyrics into the platform on her phone, and clearly we know what happens. It just goes through the database of every possible thing, and it comes up with came up with different versions of it.
Yep.
And it's pristine, relatively speaking, on your phone. The difference between actually having to go into the studio, demo, even making a demo, paying yourself or myself to come in and play those instruments. And the element that's missing, and I agree completely, is that hopefully when someone does a recording, you hear the sweat, you hear the hours that those people spent just laboring over just the right vocal, just the right mic placement, just the right this. And maybe that's a purist aspect of it, because we're musicians. I can tell you that non-musicians, I don't know if they're going to hear the difference, and that's what makes me concerned a little bit about AI.
Did I ever tell you the story about the time I met Ahmet Ertegun?
Omelet? No.
Yeah, Ahmet Ertegun. Yeah. Legend at Atlantic Records, right?
The Ray Charles movie. It's called Omelet.
Yeah, Omelet. So, I'm in his office. His nephew signed a band that Jack and I produced.
Okay.
And so he wanted to hear the mix. So we're in his office, and he's trying to tell us what he doesn't like about the mix, but he can't really. So he puts on all this other music, and he tells us his great story about listening to "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins.
Okay.
And he says, Phil, I'm not going to imitate his voice, but I'm going to talk, he talked like this, right? I mean, it's groovy. Everything's groovy, Vic, So Ahmet is telling us the story in his voice, and says, Phil came in and played "In the Air Tonight." And it had this very light, like there were no drums, right? And the whole song goes by, and Ahmet says, Phil, where are the drums? Where the drums need to come in. And he said, he goes, no, there are no drums in this track, Ahmet. There are no drums. And he said, well, you need the beat. It's got to feel groovy. And he said, and Ahmet, the beat is implied. To you, maybe you're a drummer, but not to all the morons out there, right? So basically, that was his brash way of basically saying, yeah, people not going to hear the difference, right? But they need to know. Like, they don't know what they're hearing, but they know when they hear it.
Yeah.
And then Phil went back and well, we just learned that you can't pound on the desk and the equipment stay connected. So I must have done something here, and the Rodecaster Pro clicked over from one thing to the next. But we'll put this back together. But it was pretty funny. We covered the Outcry a bit. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about your new project.
Sure.
Red 123. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, this Red 123 to me is so so dear. It's so precious to me, because this music is me in the basement writing, and getting other musicians that are just phenomenal and close to contribute and bring what they can to the original tunes. A lot of these songs are written in alternate tunings. Some of the tunes are written in like C6 tuning, open E tuning, one tuning, FCG, DCG, which I stole from like a shoegazer band. I know it's just bizarre.
How
Um,
does that work live? You go out multiple guitars or you're constantly tuning?
That's a really good question. So when I co-play live and I actually play this music for real, I have another guitar player I hire, and I literally videotape myself playing all of the acoustic parts and graphed all the chord the fingerings out. And he's a great musician. He plays all the acoustic guitar parts that were written in these weird tunings, and I play standard tunings for all the melodies,
Got it. Okay.
except for one tune which is called Blue Gray, and that one's a really popular ballad, on the second record, which is written in FCG DCG Capo 3. But if you listen to that record, I think, Vic, you're going to hear that what's wonderful about that is that it creates sonically a lot of different tensions that you wouldn't normally get from standard
Totally.
patterns on the guitar. And that's why I liked writing with like that, because even though you harmonically land in the same place, all of the grips that you would normally play aren't real. So you have to
Yeah.
come up with different grips, and you have to force your ear to say, well, what about this and what about that, and try this and try that.
People talk about key color,
Mhm.
right? Just the difference between playing a song in one key to the next and how it changes emotions and feel and vibe and all that. Tunings does the exact same thing. And that's why on my top rack here, I've got that Taylor 8 string, because as
Yeah,
I told you, it's C standard tuning,
yeah,
but your entire mindset and everything changes.
sure.
Like you just want to play completely different things. And I have a good friend who lives down in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Lance Keltner, great guitar player.
Yeah.
All his stuff's in alternate tunings, and plays in many, many of them. So I get the different feel. And for those that aren't musicians but are listening to this, you'll feel a different way when you hear a guitar or an instrument in a different tuning.
Hmm.
Because it's not, I mean, it's not uncommon, but it's not very common. What
Sure.
is common is for people to tune down a half step or to drop D, or, if you listen to some live musicians and you heard the song on the radio, why does it sound different live? They're going easy on their voice, so they've tuned down a whole step, and so things take on different characteristics. So you're in the basement, you're experimenting with open tunings and various alternate tunings. Tell me more about the genesis of
Well,
this.
one of the songs in the first record, which was released in 2022, is called Joni. It's for Joni Mitchell, because I tuned to one of her tunings and created a piece with that. Um, I'm in the basement writing these songs and writing these tunes, and then I'm connecting with different musicians. I'm sending out files to them and asking them to say, "Hey, I'd like something like this," and
Yeah.
back here. And then, literally, at one point, I said, I've got 7 or 8 good, tunes ready to go here. I'm going to go make a record." And we literally made the record coming out of COVID. We were all masked up in the studio, at Joey DeMeo's place at Shore.
Yeah. Man, what a great place. I can't believe he's still there.
Yeah, he is, man. And that drum room, that big room, the drums sound great. He's got the right mics, um, and recorded there.
So cool.
That record comes out. I kind of DIY that one. Second record, 2025, comes out, called Newtown, which I was writing a lot of that as we were going through there. And harmonically, that Newtown is a little more sophisticated harmonically than the other record. There's a player on the record. His name is Digba Ogunbayi.
Yeah, I'm seeing that here.
He is Nigerian.
Okay.
You need to have him on your podcast. This is a story of a young man who, at a young age, learned to play piano by watching YouTube in his church. He had no piano at home, and that's how he learned how to play. He
Wow.
goes on to come to the United States, and he just finished his doctorate in jazz studies from Eastman Conservatory.
Wow.
He's
Incredible.
yeah, incredible. So many things to say about this guy's playing, but in his playing, you hear all of that, you know, all of that effort to get to where he is now. Like you hear, you know, all of that. It's there in his playing. You get to hear it, and in his own right, he's a phenomenal artist as well.
You know, I'm surprised, but not surprised when I looked at the musician credits.
Yes.
I'm surprised, but not surprised that I didn't recognize more names. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised because the style of music you play was not the circle I ran in. And
Yeah.
so I don't know the cats that are really, you know, the musicians that are really great in there. But I did see Rob Tanico,
Yeah.
who I have a ton of respect for. I
Yeah.
think that guy is so talented between his music and his art and everything he does.
Rob, I hit Rob up because I knew that he had. I needed some. I needed some old keyboard sounds like Prophet, the old Prophet sounds, the
Yeah.
old, the old Emu sounds, and I know that he had a lot of software, and I know he was really into that.
Hmm.
I hit him up and I said, "Look, can you do X, Y, or Z on this?" And sure enough, I said, "Look, here's how the sound I want to get. I can tell you how to get it, and here's what you need to do." And so he sends me the track the next day with it's a very simple part, but the sound was important. And I go, "Well, I know I'm going to owe you a lot of money because you know it's a difficult sound to create." And he goes, "No, there was a patch for it. It had the guy's name on it."
That's so great.
I was like, "Okay,
Yeah.
man."
That's the beauty of the internet.
Yeah, he's a great musician. Uh,
Yeah.
he's on a couple younger guys. The bass player Cody McCory, just phenomenal musician, and then Tom Catone, who's more like our age, just an incredible drummer. And then we have this young cat, Chris Paredes from Jersey City. He's in his like mid-20s now. Brought a lot of different things to the record. Um, uh,
I don't see Chris in the credits here
in the
on Newtown.
Chris Paredes percussion, he's on there. Drums, maybe
David Anthony.
he did a lot of the percussion stuff.
Yeah.
But Chris played on Chris.
Oh, there he is. Sorry.
Yep.
Drums, Chris Paredes.
Uh, Change for Cody. And if you listen to the record, you're going to hear the difference. Like Chris is very free. There's a drummer that I love, Jack DeJeanette, who's really just plays very free, and he's not so obviously locked in time wise, but not locked in having to play the groove. Just a lot of different sound sources. So for the tunes that he played on, it really brought a lot to it. Some of those songs have a lot of meaning. Blue Gray is meaningful. There'll Be a Day. I wrote that. It was a very specific thing that occurred with my daughter, and
Okay.
That was one of those tender tunes where it was about hope, and the melody kind of reflects that. When you listen to that, there's a lot more meaning.
That Change for Cody.
Change for Cody is that's a little less exciting.
Okay.
Cody's the bass player, and there's a major 7-sharp 5 chord in there, and he said, I love that chord change, and so the tune was a Change for Cody.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so cool.
I know, but some of them, Blue Gray, There'll Be a Day, Seven Wonders is on there, and I can't remember some of the other. Shuffle 96.
Yep. November 2nd.
Yeah, there's a lot of tunes on there that are people can connect with for different reasons. But overall, I think the record and I think the writing and what everyone brought to it was it really is the same idea as any pop tune where the melodies are strong. The fellow who mixed the whole thing was Dave O'Donnell, who engineers and produces all of James Taylor's stuff for the last 15 years.
Okay.
Good friend of mine and big fan of the kind of music that I do. He does expensive. He does Keith Richards. He does their stuff. He did John Mayer's stuff. So if you don't like the songs, at least it sounds good, right? Because it's a good sounding record. But he kind of got the same thing. It's it's really about these melodies. It's about just as much as he's about the song, whether it's James Taylor or whether it's an expensive wino song or whether it's going to be, it really is about the melodies. And I think that was one of the biggest compliments that I've gotten from a guy who's been there, done that, has his Grammys, that, the melodies are there, Yeah.
Totally. There was a surprise when I listened to it, Steve. I wasn't expecting Wichita Lineman.
Oh yeah.
What was, what inspired you to do that cover and
Well,
to lay it down?
Jimmy Webb, who's the writer of Wichita Lineman, people always associate Glenn Campbell because he sang it. But Jimmy Webb,
Yeah,
as you know, anyone who's a songwriter like yourself knows that Jimmy Webb is one of the greatest songwriters in history.
indeed.
By the time I get to Phoenix, Wichita Lineman, MacArthur Park, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, I could go on and on and on about the songs that he's written. And that Wichita Lineman is one of the most beautiful melodies and the most beautiful songs ever written.
Amazing.
You don't even need the lyrics. Just listen to those melodies, the longing and the melancholy in that tune. It's there without the lyrics. And we had been playing that song acoustic like that. And I had wanted to, I had a violinist that was going to come in and play. There's a harmonica player on it. And it didn't work out because it was some financial issues. But then I thought, I if I could get someone to play like Tooth Thielsman, the harmonica player who plays chromatic harmonica, that's really what I want. There's that certain sound of that, distant sounding harmonica that has a bit of, it's so much Americana. And when I
Hmm.
hear that song, when I think about Jimmy Webb, I think Americana.
Yeah,
Nothing more like that.
I'd agree.
So the whole tune, we really went for that idea of, doing homage to the song by including those type of, uh, those elements into the tune. Consequently, it became like jazz is picked it up as song of the day, and it did tremendously well. In a couple of days, it had 5,000 hits. That song was getting played in like 12 different countries. It was received really well, and it's one of my favorite songs. So,
What platforms is your music on?
my platform is on Apple. It's on Spotify. Spotify is getting a lot, most of the hits.
Hmm.
It's on Amazon. I have a YouTube channel. You can check out some of our live playing. We opened for Joshua Redman. Jazz people will know who he is. And you'll know who this guy is. I opened for Lee Ritenour as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, in fact, I have.
I'll put all your social media stuff in the description of this episode so people will be able to
I'm going
click
to
on it and get to all your stuff.
real quick. Just give me a second. I have to show you this.
Yeah, please do.
So in high school, when I was in the Navy, I was listening to, Lee Ritenour is a big deal. And I actually had this LP of Lee Ritenour's first record, which was Captain Fingers.
Nice.
And I brought it to the show.
To the gig.
So he signs it, but he's such a sweetheart. He brings me over. He goes, "You're not going to believe this. You have to come look at this. Come look at this." So he takes me over after sound check. By the way, he played really loud. It was incredible. I loved it. And on his stand, he goes, "Look at that." And it was the title track, which is Captain Fingers on this one. He goes, "This is the original manuscript." He goes, "Can you tell?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Back then, we didn't have engraving. We just wrote everything by hand. So it's kind of messed up. And I'm sure there's mistakes in there, but that's the original."
That's crazy. That's so great.
I know. I thought it was great. It was a really nice experience to play with somebody like that. He took some time out and listened to some of the tunes. Some of our tunes are really like, influenced by heavily by, Pat Metheny, Wes Montgomery, Pat Martino. Those are guys, that I listen to that on that record, especially Tom's Blues is very Wes Montgomery-esque in the melody.
You play out? You doing any shows coming up?
I am. I'm playing tomorrow, Thursday night. I'm playing
Okay.
a great club in Red Bank that really supports improvisational music. I don't want to say jazz.
Yeah.
They do a lot of it. I just played a big wall fair, and
So that's July 3rd, right?
July 3rd, Red
Yeah.
Bank.
Well, this episode will air after July 3rd, so people will not be able to learn about that gig from this episode. But
They can come.
what's coming up?
They can come to a big show. It's the Jazz and Blues Festival in Long Branch.
Okay.
And when the record came out, I hired a publicist and really did a great job of getting a lot of airplay. As a result, we were invited to be one of the acts that was chosen to play the Jersey Jazz and Blues Festival.
That's great. Where is that? In Asbury?
That's going to be in Long Branch.
In Long Branch. Cool. When is that?
23rd of August.
Okay. Fantastic. So are you playing on the 23rd? Do you know what slot you have yet? Or
Yeah, it's 3:30.
Perfect. All right. So I'll put the link to that in the description section as well. We'll make sure everybody's got what's going on.
They can check out my website, and there's plenty of video clips on there. They can get an idea of what we sound like. And it's although it's jazz, I think if people see it, and I've always said that if people see it, similar to when I first saw Pat Metheny's group playing,
Mm-hmm.
when I saw it, it was like, oh, this is different. This isn't a bunch of old dudes sitting cross-legged on a chair. This is something exciting. This is different.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get on to our last topic here.
Sure.
So I told you a little secret about you making me 1 degree closer to jazz music. But one thing that when we first met you, you were one of the few guys that I met in music that had a very unapologetic, pronounced, proud faith. Right? To some, maybe somebody would have thought it was much. To me, it was not. I mean, you had to be an antichrist to think it was much, and I'm sure you're surrounded by that. And I think it was much because the people I hung out with really didn't talk about God and religion much. And you were the first guy that I met through music that would really bring that influence into your daily life. The backstory of me, I grew up Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Only because my dad's family did. My mom was Jewish, and my father wanted to raise us Catholic, and so she did, and we did, and I had a baptism and a communion and a confirmation and did all that. And growing up in New York, I was 2 blocks from church, and on Sunday morning, my father would say, "It's 9:30, go to church." He didn't come with us.
Okay.
Right? He didn't come with us, but it was, he was a do as I say, not as I do guy. He wanted to make sure we went. And his thing was, hey, I went, you're going to go, right? It was something he wanted to make sure we learned, but he didn't go. And I'm not knocking him for it. It was just, it is what it is. So to me, God and religion was a chore.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't get infused into me the way I think it could have.
Yeah.
You were one of the few guys in the music business that went, hey man, like this is cool. Like I have faith and I'm grounded in my faith. And are you still on this journey? I mean, how's that going for you? It's been a long time. I don't think we've ever talked about it, by the way.
No, we've never talked about it other than the fact that you used to call me Father Steve.
And you corrected us. You said it's Brother Steve.
That's right.
Jack gave you that name.
Yeah, Jack, Bonnie.
Jack gave you Father Steve. And I actually told that story to Don today. I said, Jack called him Father Steve. And at first he embraced it. But then when he got in the Outcry, it was like, hey, I'm in a rock band. Can you please call me Brother Steve? Right? And so it became Brother Steve, and we're like, all right, that was good. It was Brother Steve.
The whole Outcry thing and how that, that was a big part of it. I think that they were all very faith-based themselves. And
okay,
they were kind of going that way. I actually played in a Christian rock band in the 80s.
Okay.
Which was interesting. Am I still on the same faith journey? I think I am, but it's a little different now.
Okay.
I think that, before we got on the podcast, we talked about the multitude of religions, and I see a lot of energy in a lot of those religions. I still have a deep faith in God. I still consider myself someone who has some spirituality.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is so important about being on the faith journey or understanding those things is what it does to family, what it does to community. Like you, I grew up Roman Catholic. I was an altar boy. We had to go to church on Sundays. My dad didn't go, but my mom would go. And I'm not telling you, as you said that, he would go when he could because he was working, he was probably sleeping on Sundays. But I remember at the turn of the 99, the Dalai Lama put a book out. It was called Ethics for a New Millennium. And I'll never forget this. I've told this story before, but there's a part in this particular book, and he talks about how he feels that the erosion of any kind of religion or tradition is really what our problem is. It offers us moral compass. It gives us community. It gives us this. It gives us that. It gives us all the things that are really important, not just the nuclear family, but the traditions that we follow together as a community.
Yeah.
So what he said was, he goes, you need to find one for you. He goes, for me, Buddhism works, which I was like, what? But for you, it might be Catholicism. It might be Zoroastrianism. It might be Islam. It might be this. It might be that. But find something that works for you and embrace it. And I found that to be humbling. I thought, wow, here's a guy who's the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
He's not saying it's my way or one way and no way. The dogma of Christianity is a thing that I kind of have a problem with. It's like it's all or nothing. It's either this or nothing.
Right.
So
I know other people that have that challenge as well.
Yeah.
And Steve, sort of my journey is, and I've got a lot of really good friends that they're all in, right? They're Christians.
Yeah.
My mom's side of the family, Jews, right? I grew up with those traditions.
Yeah.
I grew up Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
And then there's all this intellect that comes into play with science and discrepancies in creation and the Big Bang and, how old is the earth? And there's so much conflict in all of this stuff. And then I have friends who are on a completely different journey, like this entire, what they call this spiritual journey and this soul awakening where it's, and you get a lot of people that say they've had near-death experiences.
Yeah.
There's another guy, I'm not going to put his name in here because I don't want to promote it yet because I don't know what I make of it, but claims to have had this experience where he's come out and he's able now on demand to see like this dome over the universe.
Wow.
That, we, the soul exists, there's love and there's really nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, I want to get back to what you've said. And this is my position as well. Regardless of what I think and how strong it is or isn't, I think in my experience through living this life, I have seen so many good things come from people who are in some community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that could be a religious community, could be CrossFit, could be pickleball, could be music. But there are rituals and things and disciplines that bring a community together. I think faith is a good one. And I have been a part of church groups here where I didn't attend these churches, but they made their offerings available to the community where my kids would participate in mission trips. Mm. They'd come back different from those trips. Yeah. Okay. Because they were helping and they saw people who had less, people who went through hurricanes and tornadoes and all of these things, the flood that came in from into the Gulf Coast, and they came back different. They came back different, and then that was through a different church. But my kids participated in that on an annual basis for many years. More good things have come. People outreach, helping a neighbor, a brother, a sister, a friend. Uplifting the community. We see, we had a friend whose husband passed away last year, and the outpouring of love from her community and the support when her husband passed away unexpectedly in his mid-50s, very healthy, like just very odd, was incredible. And it came from this community. So for me, I believe what you want, have faith in what you want, worship a cow, worship a dog, worship Jesus Christ. Think of Buddha, like there's something powerful that comes from this community. So much like the Dalai Lama, I'm going to find that book. I'm going to be interested in reading those passages because, I'm going to be interested in reading those passages because that's kind of a place I'm in. But I'm in this spot where I'm trying to stir the sauce a little bit. I'm trying to figure out what's in the pot. Like, what is it really? And I told you before we got on air that I had this experience when my mom passed, where she was literally talking to people who were wanting to bring her to the next place. I'll leave the story out. It's very long, but it was real. And it elevated my faith in that what we are doing here on this planet is it's like a second, not even, it's like a millisecond. Because then there's this eternity, this sense of eternity that comes. So all of the things that we think here are so important that we need to control. We need to do everything. We got to turn every knob and every dial. It's like, this is going to be like that blink, it's going to be like that blink.
That's the thing about faith is it's not that you can't talk about faith and intellect in the same breath because
Very difficult.
it's really tough. My cousin, who's my age, is a preacher. He's got a church up in really successful church in New Hampshire, evangelical. And I remember him saying something is as well, because when you go to turn the light switch on, before you turn it on, what makes you think it's going to go on? It's faith. You believe that it's going to go on. So that's how faith is that you just have this innate confidence that this is really the way it is. This is what I believe.
So the counter to that, right? Because I've had this conversation with people who have less faith, and I've used a similar example, and they said, no. The light switch is backed by science.
Right.
Like, I don't have faith because there's a miracle that it's going to come on.
Right.
I know that there have been engineers and there's science and infrastructure and all of these things that have actually been able to provide that.
But the Bible will say, and this is one of the things I do remember, is if you come to me as a child, a 5-year-old doesn't know anything about engineers.
That's right.
He comes as a child with just the faith that this is going to work, or the faith that daddy's going to catch me if I jump.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a certain part of
I like that,
coming to it as a child, coming to it, without this thing. And it's not to say that, I mean, I know, I do like, certain, like Bill Maher, he's anti, just like religion.
Yeah.
Because in some sense, I don't think it's really about the actual thing that happened, that the man died and the man rose and this happened. There are, if you do any studying about faith and religion, Joseph Campbell is a great, writer, puts a lot of that stuff back together. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The Heroes.
I'm not.
Joseph Campbell. Check out some Joseph Campbell. He's really amazing. Really, really great. Immanuel Kant, he draws from those guys and all of the great philosophers. But he talks about different cultures having similar stories, similar etiologies, beginnings, or similar stories of, who the hero is or who the savior is. Very similar stories. So my point of saying that is not to be, controversial and say that a man didn't walk the earth and this didn't happen, but there are similar stories. And I don't think it's really about, having this thing that's so concrete, because it's really about having this thing that's about faith and about an agreement about things that in a community, you're agreeing with those things. Your daughters and your children go away and they go help some people. They do some service and they're giving themselves. And all of a sudden they're filled with empathy and they come home.
Right.
There's something in us and as human beings that is divine. There is something there. And we're just trying to tap into that the best way we can, right? Whether it's through evangelical Christianity or whether it's through Buddhism or whether it is, there's something there. And we tap into it in different ways. We tap into it in ways like clearly music is one of those things that, that's coming from a different place. When you listen to some people play and you listen to some music, you go, that's not coming from just like some guy practice. That there's something there. You listen to Bach or you listen, you're like, oh, that's something different going on there. Or you listen to, some of your favorite artists or musicians, you hear it, So there's something to it. I think it's real. I think there's something that, I'm sure there are a lot of people who would say that, it's this part of our brain that isn't useful, that we don't use. There's all kinds of stuff like that. But I think it all comes back down to, by definition, the word faith is believing in something that you can't see.
Yeah, for sure. A friend of mine sent me an article today. It's titled "How Intellectuals Found God."
Yeah.
And there's a list of, have you seen that? And there's a whole list of all this resurgence of all these people who have really been, complete naysayers, Nietzsche's, God is dead, all of this stuff to really, what's that?
God is dead and we've killed him. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And, and they've come around. They've really come around. And even one of the people they cited, which was, I guess it's it's not surprising because he's such a force of nature, is Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah.
Because they cite, 2016 or pre-COVID, he was like completely anti-religion, anti-this, anti-that, and then they cite a podcast, and he's like, we need more Jesus in our lives,
Okay. Yeah.
And honestly, I give my friend Adam a little bit of credit for some of that, because Adam has been a guest on Joe's podcast a number of times. And, Adam's the guy who, I don't know if you know this, but Adam's like the co-founder of podcasting.
No, I didn't
And
know.
I'll send you a clip where Steve Jobs mentions him. He's like, there's a whole story about Steve flying Adam out, saying, I heard you doing this thing. I want to include it on the iPod. It wasn't called podcasting at the time. Adam was using RSS feeds with audio files to publish radio shows. And it got the attention of Steve, and Steve flew him out, and he was like, he really just wanted my blessings. Not like he needed it, but and then 2 days later at some big thing, he announced, I brought this guy, Adam Curry, out, and this is what he was doing. And he's got this radio show called The Daily Source Code, and he's got it up streaming, and you're going to be able to do this on this device, and pretty neat. But, and he would always be on there. Adam would talk. Adam's got a very successful podcast called No Agenda. It's like a media deconstruction thing where they talk about, the latest media and debunk it and find things. And he's been doing it 15 years. It's with him and a guy named John C. Dvorak. But as Adam has been on the show, he's introduced his faith journey to Joe. And it's just been interesting to watch. I don't know if that's the seed that was planted, but you hear Joe's like much more open to it now. And I heard rumors that he's actually potentially even found a church, but I don't know that to be true. I don't know if it's accurate, but I've heard it's possible. And I think my wife said she heard it through some other podcast, but
well, it's like anything, right?
Yeah.
You want to gather with people that are similar. You want to gather with people, you want to spend time with people that are going to make you that for lack of better use this terminology, lift you up or see the good in you, or you have to offer, and you can offer them something, and you can be part of that. Again, we use this word all the time, community. I think that's what religion offers. I think Joe's right. We need more quote unquote Jesus in the world, even if that doesn't mean if it's representative of empathy and love and understanding. I think we need more of that, and I know that you know that because you wouldn't be on the journey if you weren't.
I discovered a new word over the last few years that I heard, but I never understood. And that's fellowship.
Yeah.
And I love that word, the meaning, the feeling it gives me. That's community on steroids for me.
Yeah.
That's that real connection.
Yep.
Right. That's real connection around something that means something to you. And one can say there can be fellowship in music.
Yeah.
Right. Fellowship through God, fellowship through a lot of things, but that's a deeper level of connection that I enjoy.
I wouldn't be surprised if you have that on the golf course.
Oh, most definitely you do.
Right.
Most definitely.
And I think a lot of that, I think why it's so valuable, especially today, is because with so much social media and so much judgment constantly, fellowship is not about judgment.
That's right.
What's great about fellowship is that, you're accepted no matter what, and you accept people no matter what, and you're there, and you have this understanding about what's about to happen with your time together.
Yeah. Good stuff. Hey, Steve.
Yeah, man.
What a great night and a great couple hours here. Really appreciate you coming on tonight, sharing your story, talking about your musical journey.
Yeah, man.
This, the armed forces, the Navy, the Outcry, the 25-year teaching career. But that's a podcast unto itself. I'm super excited for the rest of the listening community here to hear Red 123.
Yeah.
I'll have all of your information in the description section of the episode. And I'm going to be back in Jersey this summer, and I'm going to see if I can't carve some time out to.
You, myself, and Mr. Palamucci will have to get together and fellowship.
Yeah, well, maybe we can do that on the golf course.
I like that idea.
Yeah, it'll be good. We'll go knock that ball around a little bit.
Yeah, we'll do our best.
All right, buddy. Have a great evening. Talk to you soon.
Great to talk to you.
Thanks. Bye. Please don't forget to like,